This is the show where we tell you everything that we know about retail, restaurants, and real estate. So this show broadcasts live. We're on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube. If you're watching us live right now, enjoy the fun of contributing to chats as we go. Or you can check out the replay. Just go to everythingweknow.show. So my name is James Cook. I'm coming to you live from Indiana, and I research retail and real estate for JLL. This show is also going to be on our audio podcast, which is called Where We Buy. You can check that out by going over to wherewebuy.show. Or just go into your favorite audio podcast app. I like to use Spotify. Search for Where We Buy and just hit subscribe, and you'll be able to hear this on your morning or evening commute. So we're going to do a Q&A. Type in your questions anytime. I'll tell you what, here's one to get you started. If you are a person watching this right now and you've done a recent deal with a restaurant lease, maybe you're a restaurant operator, maybe you're a landlord, what was the biggest hurdle to getting a restaurant lease signed? Throw your comments in the chat and we'll bring up any good ones. So here's why we're excited to talk about F&B right now. It's because dining is back. Check this out. This is from our new F&B report that we just released. By the by, if you want to check it out, go over to jll.com. I'll also throw a link to this report in the chat area. So check this out. This is reservations compared with 2019 as of January. They were 3.3% above 2019 levels. We are back nationally above pre-pandemic levels. So what do we know? We know food and drink is hot. So let's get some experts in here to talk about it. I want to welcome now my co-hosts. My co-hosts today are Rhonda Diaz Caldewey and Emily Durham. Welcome.
Thanks, James. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So Emily, you're joining us from Houston. Rhonda, you're joining us from the Bay Area. So you've got two different perspectives. Let me throw this map up on this screen. I want to get your take on this. So this is that same data broken out by city. And now you can see the story. It's kind of different depending on what city you're in. Some cities are way beyond pre-pandemic levels in terms of sit-down dining. Others, not so much. Rhonda, I'll start with you. What's your take on the Bay Area?
Well, James, when I see a number like that,
it's a pretty bad number, but let's just say that's just the city. That's just the city. The Bay Area is much bigger than that, right?
Yeah. I'll say, there's a lot of headlines about what's going on in San Francisco, and we have to remember that those headlines are not universal. That there's, like anywhere, there's pockets of and different degrees of what we're experiencing. Overall in the Bay Area, dining is up. There are many restaurants that are over pre-pandemic volumes by a long shot. And not only in our metropolitan area, North Bay, East Bay, South Bay Peninsula, but also along the waterfront in San Francisco in particular. The outdoor dining, even despite the weather challenges we've had this last season, are significantly up. Restaurants came back with a vengeance in many areas. The socialization, the community, the theater, all on top of the that we all need to eat. So we're seeing our inner core, downtown core remains challenged, but overall in the Bay Area, we're seeing revenues up and a lot of people out. It's hard to get a reservation at many places.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, it's bad for you, but people, you can get that reservation. So, Emily, this Texas map, at least for Austin and Houston, is very positive. What's your take on sit-down dining in Houston, where you live?
Yeah, I mean, I am not originally from Texas, but have always been in the restaurant industry in various places. And Texas really felt like the right spot to be in for the restaurant industry in general during all of this. I think that we had less to recover from. I think we saw that Texas, Houston for sure, kept going at a greater pace than a lot of other cities did. And then certainly when things were truly opened back up again, there was a clamoring to get back out to enjoy each other and enjoy our restaurants. But again, we didn't have as much of a shutdown as we saw in other cities. So things have really remained healthy here and continue to do so. I think it's interesting to note that because of what we see in some of the other parts of the country, we're getting some of those folks here in environments where business was a little friendlier during COVID. And so now what that means is we have a nice mix of people from all over the country where we might have been a little more concentrated in the past.
Makes sense. I want to do a quick shout out to Keisha Virtue, who just finished writing our F&B report, and remind everybody that map that I just showed, that's part of our report. You can download it at jll.com. Just go to like the research section. So today we're talking about like, what don't landlords get? So Rhonda, I'll start with you. What's a big hurdle? What prevents an F&B deal from getting done?
I think the reality of not only the challenges of the process, there's a little bit more complications in getting a restaurant deal done. A lot of it is about money. Our labor costs have gone up significantly. New code work requirements by certain jurisdictions. Not only the cost of opening, but some of the guarantees that landlords impose given the significant amount of TI dollars that are involved. So there's some, nuances and unique challenges with restaurants. Labor costs that have risen have affected all of retail, and they've affected, housing, everything. But when we've seen some of these, double, triple, it gives pause. Landlords, I'll say though, the demand for restaurants at projects continues. They bring people, the people that they bring and the dollars that they bring snowballs to everything else that's in the project. So they remain high on the list as an essential part of any project, despite those challenges. But they can be surprising to a landlord if they haven't been involved in this sort of process before, or if they haven't done their homework.
Gotcha. Emily, what's the biggest hurdle that you're seeing?
I think generally speaking, we just have some conflicting interests here on the tenant side versus the landlord side. I mean, I work on both tenant representation and on landlord listings. And, there just needs to be this point of compromise that's not always reached. I think most of the people on this call probably operate under the premise that we want our rent, say we're doing leases, we want our rent to be a certain percentage, our occupancy costs overall to be a certain percentage of our revenue. And then, of course, landlords who, especially those who are experiencing higher costs or higher prices for the land that these buildings are sitting on, have different goals to meet and different monthly obligations to meet. So we have a restaurant that says, hey, I'm going to do $2 million a year here. Therefore, I can only support this much rent. But the landlord doesn't always sort of look at it from the business model standpoint of the restaurant, and for good reason. So I think a lot of times it's just matching up numbers. And we even end up saying at times, this isn't your market. This market isn't going to work for your business model. And we have to really know and be prepared to say when something doesn't make sense. But preventing deals when they do is maybe simply the coming to terms together to give the landlords a little bit of what they need while giving the tenants what they need, especially time. On the tenant side, since COVID, everything's taking longer. We already had to wait several months here in Houston to get a building permit, but now our supplies are taking longer and our equipment's taking longer. So, a landlord expecting rent to come before we know we're even going to have equipment in place is the kind of thing that could prevent a deal here under the real conditions that we have in the environment, supply chain.
So well said, Emily. And in listening to you and some of the thoughts that come to mind, it's really it's the unawareness of the deal structure and the nuances that are involved. So we highly encourage landlords, you may be the best deal maker on the entire planet, but these deals are different. Let's sit down and do some homework, not only about the money, but the timing and how these restaurant models work to stay in business.
Exactly. If we have a restaurant chain we're working with and their average unit volume is X, there's no reason for anyone to expect that when we do this next location in somebody else's spot, they're going to do twice as much volume such that they can afford that much higher of a rent. It's just
all right, so
really math.
Lots of hurdles. We're going to continue this discussion with Rhonda and Emily in our group discussion at the end, but we've got to move on. So thank you for now. Hang tight. We'll bring you back. Right now, we want to bring in our next guest, which is Obi Ostergard with Vine Hospitality. Welcome, Obi.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So Vine Hospitality, you're the CEO. You're joining us from the Bay Area. For those who aren't familiar, they may already even not realize they know one or more of your concepts. Tell us a little bit about the concepts that you operate.
Sure. Left Bank Larkspur. We're going to celebrate 30 years next year with that concept. And Left Bank has become a little bit of a, French brasserie institution here in the Bay Area for sure. We're in Left Bank Larkspur. We're in Menlo Park for 25 years. Just re-signed that lease for an extension for 10 and 2.5s. We're in Santana Row for 20 years, celebrating 20 years this year. We've branched off. We opened up a petite Left Bank, so it's kind of the bistro version, smaller version of our brasserie in Tiburon that opened in October of this year. We've got Meso Modern Mediterranean, and then the LB Steak American Steakhouse brand in Santana Row and in Bishop Ranch City Center. And then we've just added the newest Left Bank to the family in Oakland, and Jack London Square opened just a couple of months ago.
Interesting. So we saw that map of
we also,
go
ahead. Don't want to. We have a partnership with Camper Restaurant in Menlo Park. Also, that is a unique, actually, partnership deal. And the way we did that was actually because of the landlord forcing us to do it that way. But we have a partnership with Greg and Logan with Camper Restaurant in Menlo Park also.
Interesting. So we sort of talked. I had that map of seated, comparing seated diners with 2019 levels. What across your different restaurants, what's it looking like now compared with pre-COVID?
We definitely had a strong 2022 for sure, building from a horrible January of 2022 to a strong fourth quarter. We came out of into 2023 strong in January for sure, even with all of the crazy weather that we had here in the Bay Area and people having to take a canoe to our restaurants. They were still doing it. So that was great. But we have started to see some softening in that over the last two periods. We're, as everybody, right, there's still some uncertainty for sure. And we try to watch it every single day and adjust accordingly.
So the recent softening, do you attribute that to economy or is that weather issues?
Oh, I mean, I never think that I can contribute it to any one thing for sure. We're also as an example, over the last 3 weeks, really, and we see this is an annual thing for us. We're in markets where spring break does really affect us.
I see.
And then I think that, what's happened this year is, maybe they went away last year for spring break, but they certainly didn't for the last the 2 years prior to that. Right. So people have been ready to get out of town on their spring breaks and have re-engaged in that process as we've seen, travel re-engage for sure. So, I mean, that's a very micro last few week thing, but I wouldn't contribute to any, clearly the media is trying to terrify us about, what the world's going on in the world with the R word, and with continued inflationary and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't contribute to one thing. I think that we've also now seen just over the last week, the weather has really improved here, and when we've had a beautiful day, people are just like coming out in hordes, right? On the first gorgeous day was Easter, which happens to be a great day for us in general across our brands. We do a lot of Easter business, but it also happened to be 70 degrees here, so people were out, and our patios were engaged. We have a ton of space in the patios, so yeah.
That's fantastic. So let's think about, I'm thinking about real estate here as you're looking to open up, a new concept, a new location for an old concept. What makes a perfect location for a new restaurant? What are you looking at in terms of real estate?
I mean, James, if I knew that, I wouldn't be opening restaurants. I'd just be, sprinkling fairy dust for other people. I think, the one thing that I always do is I say, hey, okay, if I was to do a left bank in this location and I had no other components, like, are people going to come? Like, can I bring people to this location for this restaurant concept? And are people going to come just for that? And then it's like, okay, if I feel like I can answer yes, people will come for that. And then now, all right, what does this real estate offering have on top of it? Does it have residential? Does it have, office? Does it have, great parking? Is it safe? Is it, like all of these other components? And then my confidence level continues to build on top of this. Hey, I'm going to bring this product that I know will bring a certain amount of people. And then, what are these other layers that are going to continue to increase my confidence that, we can have a home run?
Makes perfect sense. It's not any one thing. So the topic is, what don't landlords get? I just realized I know some of your landlords, so we'll we don't want to alienate anybody, so we'll keep it general. But what are things you see that landlords don't always get?
Well, I mean, I'll answer that question, but I think that the thing that we've learned over the past few years, given the environment, is that relationship is crucial. Right. Yeah. And, I think that for me, knowing the players and knowing really who they are and what they're about and how, when times are good, it's all good in that relationship. Right. But it's when times get tough, like, do you have a real partner in your landlord that's going to, step up to the plate? And, I think really across the board for us in general, we had those partners, and that's why we're, we didn't lose it. We didn't lose the concept, right? We didn't lose a restaurant. We're all here, and we're back thriving with 9 and opening 3 in the last year. So, but I was just thinking about, I don't know, what they don't get feels like a loaded question and a little bit hard to answer, because it all depends on the deal and depends on the thing, and it's like we always have to guarantee at the parent company, right? Because we're creating new entities usually for these concepts, and no landlord's accepting a new entity. And that, that guarantee piece is always a huge challenge. It's just always a sticking point. They're always wanting, a lot more than we're willing to give. And I've now started just like, let's just have, we need to have that conversation first, because if we're not closely aligned there, then, all these other details that are deep and detail oriented, it could be, we just need to move on because we're not going to get close enough on that side of the deal. And then, I was just reflecting on the Jack London Square deal that we just did. And, having, opening restaurants is so hard and so much heavy lifting and so many pieces to actually opening on time and then opening on budget and opening and all of those things, that, a landlord that's willing to think about what that first year looks like, or maybe that first 2 years, and, and then thinking about the next 8 and then what, like, but, we need help in that launching and that cash flow, and right. And the landlord pays, is going to play a 5 to 10% role in what, and can help us with some creativeness around that first launch. And, over the last 10 weeks, we've brought 10,000 new people to Jack London Square. Right. And like, wow, that's a lot of people. over a few weeks' time, right? That weren't coming to this development, weren't being, that's a lot of guests, eh? And and they're coming here and they're telling us online and on social media they're having a blast, right? So I think that that is what we provide, right? That is, not only do we provide, in most cases 30 years in Larkspur, right, like this long-term stability in a revenue stream for the landlord, we bring hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people during that time.
Driving foot traffic. I love it. All right. Well, Glenn, it's time to move on to our next guest, but hang tight because we're going to bring you back for our Q&A, our group Q&A at the end. I'll just remind everybody, if you're watching us live, put in your questions now, and our group will get to as many as we can during our Q&A. So up next, our guest is Glenn Moon with Moxies. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you for having me, James.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on to learn. I think most of our viewers are probably in the U.S., so learning a little bit about Moxies. Glenn, you're the Vice President of U.S. Development. You're based out of Dallas, Texas, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I should say Moxies. I've eaten at Moxies. I'm a fan. I ate at the location in Toronto.
Terrific.
But it's traditionally a Canadian chain coming to the U.S. For those that aren't familiar, how would you describe Moxies?
For those that are in the business, a lot of the people that are on this call, we're kind of categorized as premium casual. I've been with the company 3 months. So in part, I'm here because of what Moxies has done in the U.S. I didn't know that it was a Canadian brand up until I started interviewing and joining the company. It's quite different here in the U.S. than it is in Canada. In Canada, it's a lot less dense. There's a lot fewer people, a lot less disposable income than Americans have. And as such, they're smaller restaurants, more family dining types of entities. Here, they're kind of this big, beautiful lifestyle brand. It's a scratch kitchen, carefully curated cocktails, not a large wine list, but a well-appointed wine list. The servers are all in uniform. The bartenders are in uniform. We're kind of bar forward. We've got a mix approaching 50-50. My experience with Moxies in the 2 openings that I've been to is it's a place to be seen. Lots of pretty people, and they're spending a lot of money. So I think that trend will continue just by way of where we want to put our restaurants. So hopefully that helps give some context.
Absolutely. So let's talk about expansion plans. Where are you at? Where are you going?
Yeah, so we have one primary franchisee in the U.S. so far, and to their credit, they brought the concept down here. They've done exceptionally well, really in all areas, in terms of design and executing on the menu. So we've got 3 restaurants in Greater Dallas. We have one in Houston. We have one in Miami in Brickell. We just opened in Fort Lauderdale on Los Alas. We open in July at Fashion Square in Scottsdale, and then Boston Seaport Village in August.
These are some great locations. I think I've been to all of them. So clearly these are destinational locations.
For sure.
Yeah. So what are the biggest hurdles that you've got to overcome to open up new locations right now? What are you going up against?
Yeah. So, this is based on lots of conversations with legal and with our existing franchisee in the market. The supply chain is still number one in terms of getting open. Generally you can get we're going into unfinished shells more often than not. And we could probably have that restaurant built in 90 to 100 days, assuming we could get our permits. But you still need 9 to 12 months to get your freezers, your refrigeration, HVAC units. You're still 6 to 8, 9 months out on hoods and fryers and things of that nature. So supply chain's been the number one reason we're having difficulty getting open on time.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hearing that a lot. Megan is asking to bring Moxies to Pacific Palisades Village in California. So make
Yeah,
that
we would love
happen,
to.
Glenn.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it. It's that's a great comment. And what I'd say is, to date, it's been a little easier to get a concept like this done in the red states than the blue states. We want to be there, and we are looking in Southern California. It just takes longer. So we do intend to be there. We would love to be there, and I appreciate the comment.
Glenn, I know that you have a unique way that leases are signed with your parent company. Tell us about that. And it seems to overcome one of the big hurdles, right?
Yeah, so Moxies is one of about 15 brands that sit under Northland Properties, which is a Vancouver-based private company. It's family-owned. Most of their business is in lodging. They have many, many hotels. I think we've got as many as 8 restaurant brands. Moxie is just one of them. They also own the Dallas Stars, as well as 2 other professional hockey clubs that are not in the States. And so there's a lot of name recognition. The Stars are a big brand. I think they're the number 1 seed going into the playoffs, or close to the number 1 seed, at least in their division, which starts soon. And what we do is, even if we have a franchisee that's going in and maybe taking the lead after I've approved the site on diligence, costing, building the financial model, at the end of the day, we as a corporation are signing that lease with the landlord, and then we're subleasing to that franchisee if we have one. Otherwise, I'm taking that to the market and recruiting, another franchisee to go into that space. So, when we take covenant as a gazillion-dollar company and with some name notoriety and a very long successful history, it helps the deal. It's clean. Certainly helps in negotiations too for our franchisees.
Yeah. Yeah, that can't hurt at all. And that's unique. It's the parent company is a private company, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's kind of the flexibility that you can have if you can do it. So Glenn, you've been in the business 20 years ish.
Yeah.
What have you seen? What is it that you see from over those many years? What are some other hurdles that you've had to overcome?
Well, I don't have a river to cry, you guys. It's been, I seem to kind of fall forward at each step of the way. I was doing fee simple real estate in the hotel business for about 16 years. And in those transactions, the public company was not taking covenant or buying land or things of that nature. So that was a lot more difficult. And most of the brands that I dealt with over the years were suburban brands. After coming into the restaurant business about 3 years ago, you start dealing with leases, less fee simple land, particularly with this brand. And Moxies, to this point with Moxies, the reception from the landlords has been exceptional. And that's really just a credit to the AUVs that these restaurants are doing in Dallas, Houston, and Florida. So I think that trend will continue. Some of the struggles, aside from supply chain, obviously labor, we need to find areas where there's abundant labor. And not only abundant labor, but labor that actually wants to work and is reliable. We go into unfinished shells. Sometimes we're going into office buildings, and a lot of times those landlords want to use an office lease. And an office lease isn't always conducive to a restaurant operator. Restaurants, by their very nature, have sounds. And us being a bar-forward lifestyle concept, it can be noisy, particularly at night when the office users aren't there. But still, there's happy hour, there's lunches and buyouts and things like that. So, you have the smell of food that's going to rip around your lobby, maybe into the elevator bays and what have you. And then it can be loud. That's an issue. I know in the past, we've had some hurdles with demo, relocation, or redevelopment clauses. Our build outs on these are 6 to 10 million. in these, because we're taking, 8 to 10,000 square feet. And it's a very high design, well-appointed, very expensive fittings and furniture. And then to have a clause where they can come in and tell us we need to move or redevelop or redesign in 5 years is not a workable deal. So, we don't want anything like that kicking in until at least 10 years, but preferably, 15 or more. It's a lot to recover that cost. We need several years of operations to catch up with that kind of investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for joining me. And we're going to bring you back in a little bit to our group discussion. But for now, let's say goodbye to Glenn. And we're going to bring in Trent Patterson. Trent's with 512 Restaurant Concepts. Trent, you're joining us from Houston, right?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So getting pretty warm there. I know it's, I live in the Midwest. It's starting to heat up. Is it hot yet in Texas?
No, we're getting our 6 weeks of solid patio season right now. So we're a little Southern California for 3 or 4
Activate
weeks
that patio for a few weeks until it's too hot, right?
And then we've got to turn on all the fans and all that good jazz, but people in Texas are used to it.
Yeah. So Trent, 512 has fast casual and full service concept. Tell us about the different concepts that you operate.
So our growth concept right now is Dish Society. It's a locavore, fast casual, counter service restaurant serving all day parts. We do a really big breakfast and brunch on the weekends. We actually have some portion of our menu that's breakfast all day. Focuses on a good portion of the menu that's the grains and the avocados and the lettuces and the kale, but a lot of good things that are just good comfort food like fried chicken and biscuits, hot chicken sandwiches, brisket stuffed sweet potatoes, things that make you feel happy all day long. So we launched that concept about 10 years ago, and we're about to open in Austin and growing into new cities. So experiencing a lot of different interactions with landlords now, going into looking at Austin, San Antonio, Dallas than what we've been here in Houston. Our second concept, Daily Gather, is a higher end full service. The goal of the restaurant is to feel like you're at a dinner party, somewhere that's fun and comfortable to sit in, a few smaller plate things that people can share together at a table. We provide conversation cards on the table that help engage people into socializing. And that was something that was a real estate deal for us. We watched several restaurants turn over and knew what the right concept was for the space. And it's going to be something that we hope has some legs that we grow simultaneously with Dish Society in the future.
That's excellent. So with all these different landlords you're dealing with and in different locations you're trying to do leases at, what are the biggest challenges that you're seeing?
So far, all of our restaurants are Class A locations, and there's a lot of guest-focused design in those retail centers that puts our ease of operation kind of not in the forefront. So a lot of the issues that we run with is we've had several leases that we've signed in buildings that it was clear that they'd never had a restaurant as a tenant before. You have things like, hey, we produce grease and it has to go somewhere. And with health code, I can't just store it in my office. I have to put it somewhere, near a dumpster, but you've left 1 foot on either side of the dumpster. So we've got to be creative with where we put some of these things. And by the nature of our business, we have a little bit more messy things coming out of the back. And yes, we might have to get that dumpster taken care of every day, not just once a week. So there's a lot of those kind of operational focused things that are challenges in these centers that you don't really get a back. Every single side of your restaurant is visible to the guests. So it's a unique challenge coming from pure fast casual with the majority of my career before we opened of, having pad sites and kind of all those creature comforts of being able to operate your business as efficiently as possible and having to learn those things and teach landlords like the previous person said, we make noise. There's going to be smells that come from our building. We'll filter things, but there's all those things that we have to focus on that are always a challenge with, especially landlords that haven't done a lot of restaurant deals and going into new spaces that weren't necessarily designed with that in mind.
I know that you do a good amount of pickup and delivery through third-party apps. How does that play into your thoughts about real estate, about the restaurants themselves?
Yeah, I think immediately before COVID, we had some landlords that were looking at trying to start writing in restrictions to some of that. But once the pandemic occurred, they kind of realized that if you're going to have a restaurant, you're not going to be able to ignore it. We were one of the first restaurants on Uber Eats and DoorDash in Houston. So we've been doing it a long time. And I think because of that, the landlords are like, hey, what are all these cars doing here? That, this is something that kind of blindsided them. But our most recent leases and leases moving forward, landlords have been very accommodating to having, guaranteed to-go spots, which helps both our carry-out guests, but those third-party delivery drivers as well. And they've been great partners in helping us make sure that we can be as efficient as possible, because it gets those extra cars in and out of the lot quickly to help reduce congestion as a whole. A lot of where we have to have deeper conversations are more, with percent rent and things of that nature about what really should be factored in, shouldn't be factored in, and things that are never really our money to begin with, and how that functions with those landlords. And we've had to have some longer, more educational conversations with those guys to better understand, like, this, it's 30% of our business, but like it looks different, and you have to treat it differently than a guest who's sitting in a chair in our dining room.
And do you find, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but there's so much talk about the third-party apps taking such a large percentage of the sale. I mean, is that a profitable business for you?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. We do enough volume and have partnered strategically with enough people that we are comfortable with the commission we pay, and we've set up our menus online to accommodate that, to where it's in a range where it's no different than what a commission we'd pay to somebody who's bringing in catering sales or things of that nature. And we've just structured, I mean, again, I think we did our first third-party delivery order in 2015. So it's something that we've grown accustomed to and been able to just build in as part of our pricing model in our business. And we don't have to go packaging fees that we charge everyone. It's just and we're probably, with Dish Society, we're 35-40% in boxes going out of our front door. So it's just a fact of our concept, and we've embraced it and priced it into our model, and it works very nicely. And it's great for the building itself as well, because you have some opportunity to start looking at a slightly smaller footprint. We're taking the other avenue of just, we're going to fill those seats, but it's when it's purely incremental and it's in and out super quick, and we've built in for those things. It's been very beneficial for us, especially with brand recognition and growth, with all those customers that get to see us every day digitally.
Yeah. Well, so the title of this show this week is a little clickbaity. What don't landlords get? But I'm going to ask you, I'm asking everybody, Trent, what do you need to educate landlords about? What don't they get?
So I think outside of the operational concerns that we were talking about earlier, and understanding just who we are as a business, is understanding that the financials of restaurants are different than an office who is occupying space, or somebody who's a boutique selling $1,000 dresses. We are inherently different businesses, and those require inherently different treatment, different leases entirely, for the most part, with the things that we need to operate comfortably and grow our business in a way that will help foster their projects. And in most of the projects we're in, we are a traffic draw to that area. And especially with Dish Society being all day parts all day, you get a lot of utility out of our space. You get a lot of ability to have guests that can linger longer on your property, take breaks while they're, shopping, come early to start their day there, and end up staying all day, which we see at some of our locations, people eating breakfast and dinner with us, and they bring their husband will come in after a day of shopping, and they'll enjoy a meal together with us, and they've spent 10 hours on your property, visiting all those folks, and the value that creates for projects, just people understanding the flexibility that's required, especially when we're getting boots off the ground, the amount of effort and financials that are required those first few months, landlords understanding and being accommodating to lease structure around that. But just, long-term, the restrictions and things that they put in the lease, we all want to be successful together. And there's things that, whether that is parking or any of those operational issues, being structured in a manner that facilitates us being able to be our best. When we have to worry about restrictions that are unaccommodative in a lease, that puts us to where we're not focused on getting more butts and chairs and ultimately more people walking through the project and visiting the other retail that is in those spaces. And when we can invest all of our time focused on building our sales and not nitpicky details about it being 7:30 versus 8 o'clock or X, Y, or Z. It really helps us to do a better job of building and growing their projects.
Fantastic. Well, you got a shout out from Vince to Dish Society La Centera, where you do an awesome job. So good to hear that. Thank you, Vince.
Awesome. Yeah, that was actually that was a fun project. That was our second restaurant that we kind of got into just to get enough cash flow to keep our doors open. And we've ultimately, in the middle of COVID, relocated within that project to a much larger space. And because we signed that lease in May of 2020, landlord was very accommodating, and we were able to make that a much more successful restaurant. Its volume is up 60% from our old location, and it's just 100 feet away from where it was before. So
Wow.
it was super beneficial for the landlord because we took a more marquee spot, but that was a very unique project that having a good landlord in place was able to help us really do what we needed to do as a concept and ensure that we're successful.
That's fantastic. Well, we're going to open it up to our entire group now. So we're bringing on board everybody that we've heard from so far back up on screen. If you're viewing at home, feel free to add in a question for the group, and we'll get to as many as we can. And those folks in the group, if you want to throw something out to everyone, that's fine too. Let's start it off, though, with some solution thinking. We know about the hurdles we've talked about. Anybody have some creative solutions that they've encountered they want to mention?
Yeah, I think that certainly on the tenant side of things, when people hit the skids during COVID, and you can't pay rent if you're not enjoying revenue. If we're shut down because of a pandemic, it's very hard to pay rent. So what we quickly found, though, was a lot of our landlords willing to kind of let our restaurant tenants forego rent for a little while or partial rent for a little while and tack it on to the end of their lease, which really seemed fair to everybody. And otherwise, it just wouldn't have come to fruition for anybody. So that and there was quite a lot of that. So we were certainly appreciative of that compromise.
Interesting. Anyone else with a creative solution to a problem they recently encountered?
I would say, we certainly love landlords that also want to be capital partners. And, that's not for everybody, and we understand that. But the ones that can do that and are bringing that to the table up front, it certainly helps to sometimes get these things over the finish line.
Yeah, and I would second that with the capital partner piece, because that has really created some of our best landlords, because obviously they're vested in our success quite literally. And that has fostered a very understanding relationship, and one that seeks to grow together and better understand how we can operate in harmony versus some of the projects where it's we are landlord, you are operator, and here are our rules.
Yeah, and then I would reflect back to when those landlords tend to be the ones that came first to the table during the pandemic and were ready to really participate and help us through that horrible time we went through together.
Yeah, absolutely. Much more of a partner. Well, here's a question from Vince that, you can answer it if you want. You don't have to. What's the average unit volume for your concept? If anybody wants to answer that, I'll throw it out there. If not, you don't have to. That's an optional one. All right. So Carrie asked, so I think we were talking about how long it takes from the lease signing. So at least a year on a restaurant from lease. Does that sound appropriate to all of you?
That'd be a
I
long
think it
one.
really depends on where you are. Here in Houston, we often find ourselves questioning if we're dealing with the city of Houston or perhaps one of the counties. And if it's the city of Houston, it's bad news, because it takes a lot longer to get through that municipality for our permits than some others. So that just, begs the necessity to find out when you're embarking on a project how long permits are taking where you are, and liquor licenses are taking where you are, to really understand that timeline.
Yeah, and I would say we often just bake those into the, like that is when the triggers happen, after liquor, after permits, right? That's when the trigger is, because then we have control somewhat, maybe a little bit more, and being under the guidance of the waiting for a permit.
Yeah, there's many variables that are beyond anybody's control. And so it goes back to, as a landlord, familiarizing yourself with this process, getting to know your customer up front and what their needs are. So it's not a big surprise when these things show up.
Yeah, a lot of our most recent projects were either new construction or signed in transition during COVID, and building in a lot longer lead times on those things. So we've, we haven't experienced, I actually had this conversation with Emily a few weeks ago. We haven't experienced the struggles that some have with city and things of that nature slowing us down. I think we've just got a good team on that I'm kind of hands off with. But most of our leases we're signing, 2+ years out on projects, because we want to make sure we're in that corner spot, and we are hyper in tune with the market we're in and the two markets we're going into, because we grew up in those markets and we know the importance of that side of the street versus this one. So we're willing to kind of commit to those things a lot farther in advance. So we get that luxury of a little more leisurely run up sometimes.
I would also throw, like, you just never know what might happen. So, as an example, a little anecdotal story, but we were in the midst of all of this and needed to get some final sign-offs, and the city got attacked by malware. Full shutdown of all computers, and landlords got to understand that, like, we got to have a conversation. This is a delay that we can't open, totally out of our control, and you never know. So you got to be able to pick up the phone and have those conversations, those one-off conversations sometimes also, and hopefully somebody is understanding on the other side of the phone. And if they're not, maybe wrong partner.
All right, so I'm going to try to get to a few more of these before we run out of time. Colin says there's a lot of discussion about partnership. So how common are deals involving a base minimum rent, and then there's a percentage rent over some certain sales break point? How common is that percentage rent structure?
Certainly what the landlords want.
We are seeing it more than ever here in Texas. And I think it used to feel like it was mainly for places like Moxies. It was for, full service, fine dining, high grossing restaurants. And now we're seeing landlords asking for percentage rent on fast casual deals on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably 60-40 that way, and embrace it, because for us, it gives us a lot more leverage from a TI perspective, and a lot more leverage of easing and greatly reducing our risk up front. And for us, having a guaranteed at least double or triple for us is a big deal. So that has been very helpful for us, and we're okay sharing in that success when someone takes we're taking risks on us as a newer concept.
I would say that's the most common format when TIs are involved. The trade-off is typically between TIs and a percentage rent, whether that's over a natural break even or some unnatural break. But that has been the most common formula we've seen for quite a while.
All right, I'm going to get one more. Go ahead.
Our stores have that in them. Only one in the U.S. does not. So,
gotcha. All right, I'm going to get in one more question here. Great insights. Oh, trying to get it up on the screen. I'd love to hear about the demand for private dining space, which is an attractive amenity in the Southeast, where I'm assuming John is based. So we're hearing more and more about that, sort of these private dining areas. Have any of you encountered those as an amenity in a project?
I mean, I can tell you, when I say we, I mean our franchisee in the U.S. Has made it a point to put that in every restaurant that they've built so far. In Canada, it's very Genesis. Most of those restaurants are attached to existing lodging assets that the company owns. And they have, they have function space, they have meeting rooms, they have full catering. It's just been modified when it came to the U.S. to be more of a freestanding restaurant. But these franchisees are from Canada, kind of that DNA, and they include private dining in all their stores, and they sell.
Yeah, in our daily gather concept, we built the restaurant to have 4 separate spaces that could easily be partitioned off for dining, and it's been a lot more than we had anticipated, and enjoying that. Being that with Dish, it kind of requires an entire restaurant buyout if we're going to do something like that, which we do. But super enjoy private dining, especially those happy hours on Tuesday at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah, and same here. But we also definitely try to, in the design, we try to make them, also ability to be expanded dining space. So, Trent mentioned partitioned, right? Like, how can we have private dining space, but also, Friday night, open it up and have it feel like part of the dining room, so on and so forth. So, having kind of hoping to have best of both worlds, not just having it maybe a strict private dining space that's all it can be used for, and it only feels good. Having it be a little bit more ebb and flow.
Well, we had more questions than we had time to get to because we are out of time. I want to thank all of you so much for joining me today. This is really just blown by. And thank you very much. And we'll have you. Yeah, there you go. Round of applause. Great job, everybody. And we'd love to have you on again. Now, for folks who are interested in seeing the latest research from JLL, we just released an F&B report. If you just go over to jll.com and go to the research insights section, you can download it. It is free. It is awesome. Keisha Virtue on my team wrote an amazing report. It's all about like the new concepts that are out there and a lot of different statistics on the latest in F&B trends. So check that out. And you should probably be subscribed to our podcast if you enjoyed what you saw here today. Just go to any podcast app and subscribe to Where We Buy, or you can find us on the web over at wherewebuy.show. And if you want to see more videos, go over to YouTube, and you can find us at everythingweknow.show. That'll take you to our site on YouTube, and you can hit subscribe right there. One last thing. If you're over on LinkedIn, so many action items. If you're over on LinkedIn, follow JLL Retail, and you'll know every time we go live on LinkedIn. So we're going to be back with another live stream next month. If you follow us, you'll be able to check it out. And if you want to know more of everything that we know about retail, you can join us here again next month.